Hi everyone, welcome to today's English lesson. Thank you so much for those of you that are continuing to upload your stories. We're really enjoying seeing it. Let's get started with today. So, we're building up now. We've got one more lesson after this, then your story is written, and then you can have a little look over it, edit it, and it's going to be finished, and it's going to be great, I'm sure. From what we've seen some really high quality writing. You should be really proud of yourself. Okay. Today then, you're going to be writing the part of your story where you're building up to the final climax. So this is the building of the tension. This is where you can really go to town on making us feel on edge, which is what we want. Skills and success criteria. So what I need you to do is you need to deliberately, that means on purpose, mention details that link back to your rumour story from yesterday. So whatever details you chose to include, for example, dripping or clicking or tapping or whatever it is you've included, you're going to include those again today in the present so that it links back and it creates that eerie sense. You're going to increase the pace a bit. You're going to pick up the suspense. Up until now, it's been subtle, hopefully. There's not been too much. Now, you're going to really go for it. As you know, please only write this part. From what I'm seeing, you're all doing really well at that, so thank you. You're not rushing ahead. And, well, I hope you agree, but from what I'm seeing, the quality is much better because you're taking your time. Okay, and of course we want it handed in, as I've said every single time, so I won't go on too much about that. So far, you've done all of that, and yesterday you have told your rumour story now that will link into the climax. It's essential you've done that. If you haven't done it, you need to go and do that first. Alright then, so the first part of today is we need to start a new paragraph, so new line, because we're going from our rumour story back to the present day. So we need to show the reader that we've changed. The first thing we need to do is write a sentence that tells the reader that you are back in the moment. Make it really obvious to them you're no longer telling the story about the rumour, you're back to the main story. Now in my example, it looks a bit like this. So I've got back in the classroom, let me just put the pen tool on, back in the classroom, the sound of rain could still clearly be heard on the roof. So the key sentence there is back in the classroom. Now you can literally model that and take it, so you could change it to whatever is relevant for you. So back in, I think I've seen someone that's setting theirs in a hospital, so back in the hospital. And then what I've done is I've described something. The sound of rain could still clearly be heard, so I'm going to put the silence still filled the room. Something like that. There you go. Okay, so I've got back in the hospital. That's a fronted adverbial going on there because it's telling me where it's happening. And then the silence still filled the room. So you could equally have, if you said about a story that happened a long time ago in the same place, you could say back in the present day, i.e. now, back in the present day, comma, because it's fronted adverbial, and then you could put the same thing, the silence filled the room, the rain still beat down on the ceiling, whatever you want to put. So, can you now please write that first sentence? So, you need to bring the reader back to where you are. So, pause the video now, do that. Okay, so next sentence or so is just give a little bit of detail of what your characters are doing. So, I've put how Callum and Nick had pulled up 2 chairs and were currently sat huddled in the book corner. Your characters may still be wandering round. Okay, so you need one sentence where your characters are doing something. So pause the video, go and do that now. Okay, and you're back. So that was what we call the linking part of your paragraph. So it's going to link in from your rumour to what you're about to write. And it's really important that you don't just have a sudden change, because otherwise it can ruin the pace of a story. So having a bit of a linking paragraph, which is what you've just done here, is really important to help with the flow of your story. Now, this is the main bit. Your characters need to be separated. Probably. Assuming you're going on something like I've written, where you have two characters, and one of them ends up apart from the other, you need to have them separated. Now, you need a reason why that's going to happen. And it needs to be something that is what we call plausible, i.e. it's kind of possible, it's not really weird or out there, or, oh, they got separated because a unicorn came down the corridor and suddenly we chased it. Or rather, I chased it and my friend Bob stayed behind because he didn't like unicorns. It needs to be reasonable. So in my story, the reason that Callum wanders off is to get tissues for Nick, because he's got a bit of a cold and Callum's feeling guilty because he's got him there in the first place. Is it the best reason? Probably not. You might have something better, and that's great. Please do. But you need to decide what's going to happen to your characters. So you've got your two characters. You need to decide who is going to go off on their own and why. Now, I'll give you some possible reasons. And then you can either pick one or go for your own. So for why your characters could get separated, well, one of them could get lost. That's completely plausible. One could get lost. Why else? Well, you could have, I don't know, maybe one of them sees something that interests them and goes to investigate, but the other one doesn't realise. Yeah, the other one's walking down the corridor, doesn't realise his friend has popped into the room because he's seen something that interests him. A bit like happened in The Curse of Cogston House, where one of the characters kind of just stayed looking at the clock and the other one kept on walking. You could have something like that. Why else? Maybe one of them needs help. So maybe something happens to one of your characters, they get injured, maybe they trip or hurt themselves, and the other one has to go off to try and find help. Now, the nice thing with that is the climax could happen to either one of them. There's some possible reasons. If you have your own, great. If not, pick one of those. Now, what you also need to decide is where is your character in danger going to end up? Because your character, the one that's in danger, is going to need to travel somewhere, and that somewhere is where your main event is going to happen. In mine, it was the bathroom, which is where the medicine woman appeared. In yours, I'm going back to the hospital one. Maybe it happens in a specific ward of the hospital, or in the staircase, or something like that. So where is your character in danger going to end up? So do they end up in another room? If so, which room? Where are you going to set this? Because this is really important, because this is where the whole thing you've been building up to is going to happen. So take your time to think about it. Don't ruin it and rush it. Is it going to happen outside somewhere? If it's in a building, probably not, but you never know. So you need to decide why your characters get separated, and the one that's going to end up in danger, where are they going to end up? So pause the video, please, and have a go at that now. You just jot it down. It's not on Seesaw, just jot down some notes. Okay. So, the next part then is a short paragraph, 3 to 4 sentences, explaining how your characters move on from where they are and why they get separated. So if we have a look at my example. Let me just move me for a minute. Okay, so want me to see if I can get you some? Callum asked, desperate to be helpful. The guilt was getting to him and he felt like he needed to do something. Leaving wasn't an option yet on the account of the weather, but he could at least try and make it a bit easier for Nick while they were stuck here. Where from? So what I've done there, in the first part of the paragraph, I've made the reader realise why they're going to be separated. So in this case, it's because he's saying about, you've got a cold, I need to go get you tissues. Then, in this part, I've said where he's going to go. I'll go check out the bathrooms. They might still have something in them. Blah, blah, blah. Okay? So you need to have 3 to 4 sentences, and you can do it as a conversation between your characters if you like, or they can just be wandering along and one of them stops to look at something. One of them gets injured and says to the other one, I need you to go and get help. Whatever works for you. 3 to 4 sentences, please. Off you go. Okay, and you're back with me, hopefully. Right, next part, final part. Long part, though, for today, but it's the final part. This is the good bit. This is where your character is alone and is walking towards the main setting of where your climax happens. They're not there yet. Really important. They are not in the setting where it's going to happen yet. They're not in that particular room yet. They're walking towards it. This is where you're going to mention those details that you included in your rumour story. The ones that make us go, oh, it's a bit weird. For example, tapping or dripping or clicking or the air suddenly cold. Tap, 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 like I did in mine. Now, as you can see here, I put a lot of time into this bit because it's the most important bit. It's the bit where that suspense is being built. Do you need to write this much? Of course you don't. But I would say you need to write a decent length paragraph for this. You know, this is the last part you're writing today, so you can take your time on it. But don't rush it, please. You've done so. I'm going to go on a bit here. You've done so well in your story so far. You've built up to this. Don't let it get ruined now because you think, oh, I'm just going to finish this off. Rush it, rush it, rush it. No, you've done great so far. Keep it going. Got one more lesson and then you're done. You can do it. Now, there's a lot going on here, but I've broken it down into what actually happens. So, what's actually happening in this? Well, the first thing I do is I describe the corridor. So that is describing where they are currently walking. So if yours is a corridor, great. Have a look here. There might be some bits you can steal. If it's not a corridor, describe where your character is walking. Part 2 is the character notices something strange and describes it. He couldn't hear the rain. Odd. Then we have the first detail from our rumour story. Drip. The water. But the character's going to dismiss it. Part 4, character dismissed it. Tries to explain it away. Oh, it's probably, I don't know, it's probably that, or it's fine. Part 5, it happens again. Drip, drip. And the character is now getting a bit concerned, if I'm honest. It's a bit hard to explain it. Part 6, another strange thing happens, and this is now getting really creepy. The water fountain covered in rust is what I included. Well, it was covered in rust, but it's now completely... Well, no, sorry, it was completely clean, and now it's covered in rust. How are you going to explain that? You can't. And then 7, your character enters the place where the main climax will happen. They open the door to step inside. They push the shelf aside. They pull the curtain open. They're not in it. That comes tomorrow. But they're going to prepare to go inside. Now, of course, for this bit, you do need to do a little bit of planning. because this is the important bit. So, for each bit, this is going to be on Seesaw, but I'm going to give you some thoughts of what you could do before you go and do this planning bit. So, planning. Where is the character walking through? That's what you need to decide first. So, are they going to walk through a corridor? Are they going to walk through a tunnel? Are they going to walk through? Are they going to walk on a path, a particular path? Are they going to walk through, if it's set in a forest, for example, are they going to walk through some bushes? Where are they walking? Now you need to decide what seems strange about it. Not linked to your rumour, just something that's a bit odd. So maybe it's how cold it is, or how quiet it is, or maybe there's, I don't know, suddenly a lot of noise. What else could you have? How cold it is, maybe how hot it is. Maybe go the opposite. Okay, so you need to decide something strange that's going to happen first. Now the next bit, I'm just going to move me over here. There I go. The next bit is, what is the first detail you mention that links to your rumour story? So is it going to be like a tapping? Or a clicking? Maybe it's something to do with something the character left behind. I don't know. It's going to be really dependent on what your story is here. So look back on your rumour story and see what you could include first that seems a bit strange. Then you need to do the same for the second detail. What's the second thing you're going to mention that links to your rumour story? Now this is the important bit. How are you going to make us realise your character is scared? You are not going to say, he was getting a bit nervous now, because that's boring. So how could you show us, not tell us, that your character is scared? Well, maybe you could describe a shiver. Shiver ran down his spine. Maybe the hairs on his arm or her arm. Hairs stood up on end. How else could you do it? Maybe the eyes grew wide. Maybe they slowed down. Slowed. To a walk. Maybe if they were running, they're now walking. Something like that. So you need to show that your character is feeling nervous. Not terrified, but nervous, anxious. But don't tell us, because it's boring. Show us by what they do. Maybe they clench their fists or something. So, go and do the planning sheet. Come on back to me, and then we're going to do the writing. Lovely. You don't spend long on the planning sheet. It took me like 2 minutes. I just put words in, and that's absolutely fine. This isn't the bit you're writing. It doesn't need to be detailed. It's just your plan. It's only for you. It's not for me. Right. So, what are we writing? The building of the tension. What's happening? This is your structure. Needs to be, I would say, 6 to 7 sentences long at least. A good paragraph here. You can do it. I know you can. Here's your structure. You don't have to follow it. But if you're struggling to write enough, follow it. It's laid out for you. So you need to do like a couple of sentences about each of these. If you do a couple of sentences about each of these, your paragraph will be a good length and it will read well. Okay? So, follow the structure. Don't follow the structure. Write the part where we're building that tension. Take your time. It's the best bit. It's the bit I love reading. Tomorrow, we finish the story with the climax. Your hard work's going to pay off. It's going to be great. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you are enjoying. Hope you have enjoyed. Please also make sure you're listening out for Mrs. Vary, who is reading a story on Cecil. It's really nice. And I will speak to you again tomorrow. Goodbye.